You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. The Locked On Hawks Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Hawks were in Chicago to begin a 3-game road trip. So can we give some love to the G for how this road trip started? My goodness. And dare we ask them to put this on repeat? We'll discuss. But first, let's talk takes on how the Hawks bullied the Bulls in their final game of the regular season series for a 110-94 win. And DeShaun, you said the role players played their roles.
They did. And listen, I mean, Tenitra, when you start looking at this team on paper coming into the game, no Trae Young, no problem. No Jalen Johnson, no problem. DeAndre Hunter, no problem. This one, that one, a third. I'm just amazed to see what I'm seeing. Like, just when you thought that potentially the most impressive win of the season could have maybe had come 24 hours ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And then they come out and do this. We got guys that are seeing the floor for the very first time. You got guys that hardly ever see the floor. They're going out for career nights. Talking about random role players. I know it sounds like a big slap in the face, but like, these guys look like that they've been here before. And this was definitely a game that, even though the Atlanta Hawks had led by 17 points, which sounds crazy enough already as it is. Mm-hmm. And, Chicago started chipping away at that in the third quarter. It never really looked like it was out of the reach of the Atlanta Hawks. Like, they seriously were, being threatened by losing this game. Yeah. They outworked Chicago. They out-hustled Chicago. More second chance points. It's just like if there was ever a game for that old cliche saying of just wanting it more or next man up, that has been the Atlanta Hawks, if not no other time during this season, certainly during this game.
Oh, yeah. And I said the same thing, that they out-hustled the Bulls. Going into halftime, you saw them go on a 15-5 run, and that kind of let you know, hey, even though the Bulls may creep back in, maybe get within 5, 6, 7 points, that's about as close as you'll get, because every single time someone stepped up and someone just snatched that comeback right out of the Bulls' hands. Mm-hmm. So like you, I kind of went in that same direction and said the Hawks were shorthanded. And I'm like, they were. You wouldn't have been able to tell, because literally you could go down this roster, and we're going to deep dive into a couple of specific players later. So I just want to stay kind of at that high level for some. And you think about David Roddy, and I know that some people want to see him play more minutes. Well, you got what you wanted. He only had 4 points, but he had 6 big rebounds, a couple of assists, and 3 steals. And like you said, that's one of the many career highs that we saw tonight, because he tallied so many steals by 4 steals it was by the 10:32 mark in the second quarter. And that was a career high for him. And when you think about that as being one example of a guy who had to step up, a role player who had to step up and absolutely did it, got to give him so much credit. And again, literally, I was like, are they really shorthanded? In that last game that they played against Chicago, they didn't have Ayo Dosunmu, and the Hawks were able to win. And we all know, between him and Kobe White, that seems to be their kryptonite when it comes to Chicago. Yeah. But they had Ayo Dosunmu back tonight, and I'm thinking, they have a full squad. Now, granted, he must have been on a minutes restriction because he came off the bench, if you will, and didn't really do much damage. 9 points, 3 rebounds for him. That's not a big deal. Kobe White was slightly scary at times, but again, every time he did something, there was some role player for the Hawks that had an absolute answer for him. So I felt like, okay, Cody, go off. But as long as there's an answer for you, and to me, 16 points, that's kind of pedestrian. Zach LaVine, same thing, 16 points, that's kind of pedestrian. I am good because of one thing that you mentioned, which was the hustle aspect of wanting this game more. And that sounding like a cliche, but it was the truth tonight. any category you can look at, with the exception of the one we know, which is the 3-point, pretty much the Hawks won. And when I am looking at the Hawks, and that was actually the Hawks ended up winning that too. Let me give them credit. As terrible as they shot, 13 of 43 from the 3-point line and only 30%. Heck, somehow, some way, they were just pesky enough to these Bulls to keep them going 6 of 27. And we know for a game like this, DeShaun, the Bulls' biggest chance, their biggest opportunity to come back and snatch a win would have been from the 3-point line, because the Hawks were everywhere else saying you're not going to win it this way.
They were. And I know that this might sound like a little bit of a dig, and I promise you it's not, but I don't know. It's just like I don't know if Chicago, I mean, 20 turnovers, give credit obviously to the Atlanta Hawks defense on that as well, without some of their better defensive players, although playing with some of them as well. I don't know, look like Chicago is smoking some of that funny smelling stuff out there a little bit. It's just a very weird kind of game for them. Like you said, pedestrian for a couple of those guys. And again, you got to give some credit, because Chicago may not necessarily look like on paper or what will reflect on the record as one of the better teams. However, they're one of the better scoring teams in the NBA. They're one of the better 3-point teams in the NBA. You have a guy like Kobe White, who's coming off of a big time year on last year, being considered for 6 man. Zach LaVine may not be amongst the elite of the elite in the NBA, but when you start talking about second tier all-star players, he's one of those type of players. I also, sometimes it was looking like the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, I like the way that it just appeared like they were playing freely. Like they didn't feel like they were under any pressure. They didn't feel like, we gotta, just keep it competitive. Like they treated the game like it was a game that they knew they were gonna win and was expected to win. So I want to give them credit for that, because some of those shots that they were making, it looked like they couldn't miss some of those shots even if they tried. They made it look very easy. They were very in sync, in rhythm. It wasn't look like these guys look like they've been playing together forever. And if I'm just being honest with you, like some of those guys are probably used to playing with one another on the same practice type team, whatever, what have you not. So they probably have just as much chemistry as anybody else on the floor, to be honest.
That was my absolute thought, because you're talking about, and we'll go more into the G League in a minute, in the second seg, but you are talking about guys who literally played a lot of games together over the last couple of years and 24 hours ago. So it doesn't hurt for them to have that chemistry, although you can look at it and say, well, the Hawks overall played 24 hours ago, right? The minute that the game ended at State Farm Arena last night, they were on a flight to Chicago and had to turn around and play again. And that includes guys like Dyson Daniels, who still played a remarkable game considering he was playing last night. And when you think about all of those little hustle areas, right? You think about the fact that, when they turned them over 20 times, they got 22 points out of those turnovers. So they definitely made opportunities out of, or took advantage of the opportunities that they were able to make for themselves. And then on the offensive boards, a lot of second chance points. Remember, there was even a time where nobody boxed out Dyson Daniels on a free throw except Dyson Daniels.
Except for Dyson Daniels,
So that was the kind of game that we saw from all of the Hawks tonight, and just an incredible game for them to be able to. And we know one of the most important things for this game is that they now split the season series. And you never know when it comes down to tiebreakers later on in the season, and you're trying to get seeding for the playoffs. Those kinds of things matter. So in addition to it being a game where the Hawks were able to get a win with a crew not named Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and others, that's impressive. But more importantly, this one could be a big time thing for them down the road. But speaking of giving some love to the Hawks for winning, can we give some love to the G? We'll talk about it in the and one. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, hey, some of us have an ongoing problem, which is time. We just flat run out of time between work, life, trying to eat healthier, which is what we all want to do, sometimes it kind of stresses you out because you can't get all of those things in a row at one time. You go to the grocery store, then you come home and realize, did I really buy what I went in there for that was healthy? Well, that's a struggle for most people. And everything can change with that, with Hungry Root. That's a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. It's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one, because they take care of grocery shopping, recommend meals and groceries based on your tastes and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. And for me, the high protein piece is so critical. And I know a couple friends, the gluten-free option is going to be big for them. And the best part, every meal's ready in 15 minutes or less. So you're going to love Hungry Root as much as we do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedonnba and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's hungryroot.com/lockedonnba, code LOCKEDONNBA, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. Don't miss out. So we talked about it at the beginning of the show. People talked about it on social media ad nauseum, and every broadcast talked about Trae Young being down, Jalen Johnson not playing, DeAndre Hunter not playing, and Zaccharie Risacher not playing. And we'll talk about Zach in a minute. But those are guys, when you look at them, you're talking about 3 starters and a guy who can be inserted into the starting lineup, not on that floor tonight. So after getting an overtime win, which the Skyhawks got in Cleveland last night against the Cleveland Charge G League teams, Keaton Wallace and Daeqwon Plowden had to suit up for the Hawks tonight. They played 35 and 36 minutes, respectively, Tuesday in Cleveland. And of course, Dominic Barlow was already up from the Skyhawks, although he did not really play, didn't get a chance tonight. But DeShaun, like, you want to talk about making the most of an opportunity. And of course, I'm excited because I'm the sideline reporter for the Skyhawks broadcasts. So we're always looking at these guys and, talking to Coach Cly about the opportunities that they have and how he wants to set them up for these kinds of roles. And that's why, to me, it's not shocking that they were prepared for the moment, because one thing I can say about the Hawks and their farm system, if you will, is they prepare everybody, the coaches, the players, the conditioning staff, heck, us as the broadcast team, everybody prepares as though we are the Hawks. Even our entertainment, head of entertainment, is also on the Hawks team. The reason I say that is because I can tell you from listening in to other coaches, not every G League team prepares like the Skyhawks do, DeShaun. So when I saw them tonight, I was like, so proud of being like a part of that team, because Daeqwon, he did his thing and Keaton did his thing. And I know Keaton's been up before, but for me, DeShaun, just to be able to look at a box score and see Keaton Wallace's name and see Keaton Wallace also had 27 points and hit all of his free throws, was 4-7 from 3, and then go down and see 19 points, 4 rebounds for Daeqwon Plowden. Man, just excited for those guys to be able to shine in this moment.
I was going to say, if nobody else has seen these guys any more than anybody else, it's got to be Tenitra Batiste, right? Like, you can speak on this more than I can possibly speak on this. Literally, and I mean this in the most respectful ways, no arrogance over here at all. But when I literally have watched more basketball, at least I feel like anyways, than just about anybody else on this planet, and I'm looking at guys like, who in the heck are these dudes? Like that, and to see them not only doing what they're doing, but how they're doing it. Yeah. I think Plowden went off for like 6 for 6 without even missing a shot at any point at one point. And then obviously, what when you're looking at overall everything that, like, the impact that they had, there was some leadership I was seeing in there, so, as well. And it was mind-boggling. Like, it was surprising to me. Like, and it's just good to see that they have the support of the others. And as much crap as the G League gets about, oh, get rid of the G League, and it doesn't really help these guys succeed and prepare them for success on the next level in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, when you're talking about guys that are coming for, it's when you get sent down to that G League sometimes, let alone ever getting a chance to even, be sent down. Sometimes you just have to work it. What I guess the cool kids now are calling it, out the mud or whatever. I call it taking the stairs. No elevator, no escalator. These are a couple guys that took the stairs from the very bottom of the bottom. Everything sounds real cute when you're talking about, got it out the mud and this and that and the other. But when you put real context to that, and there's guys are shooting in the gym, ridiculous long nights, hours of the night and so on and so forth. And I think we all can relate to that in many ways in our own personal lives. But I just think that it's really awesome for them, because you're talking about getting opportunities. You're never going to have experience until somebody gives you an opportunity at getting some experience. And I'm just glad to see that these are just a couple guys, because listen, V. Krejci, he's not the ideal, starter by any means. We kind of crack on him from time to time and talk about the liability on defense and everything else. And not having Trae Young, we always have these big, listen, the top three score, not even just about the starters for this team, but the top three scorers for this team was out. One of them is the most critical position and the leader of this team, the everything to this team, so to speak, the catalyst. I just couldn't have drawn up. I don't think anybody else could have done it better. Saying all of that now in here, I promise, this is a huge credit to the coaching staff for being able to put something like this together, instill the confidence, put the battery in the backs of some of those guys, and give them the confidence to go out there. And what they did tonight, it was unprecedented. And I'm happy to see that they did it the way they did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I think about the Bulls head coach, right, and I'm thinking like, okay, Billy Donovan is calling timeout. Billy Donovan, I think, called a timeout like 2 minutes in to the game, like literally. And it seemed like he was every 5 to 7 minutes. Bulls call a timeout. And you never heard Quinn Snyder really call a timeout tonight. He had a challenge, but other than that, there was maybe one time where I saw him call a timeout to reset these players. So I think you're absolutely right. But that's also a credit, like you said, to the coaches, because Coach Steve Cly is in training. So when the G League doesn't have a game, or when the Skyhawks don't have a game, he's up with the Hawks and he's learning. Ryan Schmidt was the G League College Park Skyhawks head coach last year. Ryan Schmidt got promoted to be a part of Quinn Snyder's coaching staff this year. That's what they do. That's what they do across the board. So a lot of what you're seeing as well is what Ryan Schmidt put into play last year, or setting that philosophy. And then this year, and this is something that you and I talk about all the time, even when the Hawks lose, if we see them compete, we're going to give them credit. And Steve Cly's mantra is compete, communicate, and connect. If you do that more often than not, you're going to win. And I wanted to say this as well. I think that you saw just about every player. Bogey's the only one who didn't have a rebound. And we know Bogey just had a rough night. I mean, between him and Garrison Matthews, 1 of 16 from the field, that kind of a lot of times will get you out of rhythm and out of sync for some other things that you want to do. But shout out to this team for really taking it seriously at both ends of the court, because for our 9 players to suit up and actually get to play, and 8 of them get rebounds, that's pretty darn impressive.
I think it just also goes to show that as much as we say and talk about, and by no means is this something that I think that this team can afford to continue to do it from a consistency standpoint. Let's not fool ourselves. But I think it also says something that just when you think that Trae is the all everything, or you think that Jalen Johnson's the go-to guy, or even DeAndre Hunter, with as much as he has improved, like you've got guys like that you can rely upon. Everybody doesn't have that. And I think that that's something that's so special about this Atlanta Hawks team, is the fact that we're, guys are picking their brothers up and uplifting one another and giving them the confidence. The practices are good. This is where you can tell and weed out the boys from the men in terms of being able to say, here's what a real team looks like beyond just on paper.
Right. Now, like you said, We cannot expect this type of unbelievable play each and every night. We don't know if we're going to see it. We want to see it on repeat come Saturday, but there are some real concerns about the guys we didn't see on the court tonight. We'll discuss on the other side. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by Wayfair. So after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. Always finding the opportunity to declutter and refresh your space, as well as my space, because I love to do that. It helps you get back into the routine. So whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start 2025, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. Currently, I will tell you, I am looking for a new desk, and I will say they do have a huge selection that makes it easy to find pieces that kind of fit my style and budget. And also, I like to kind of have different comforters that are for each season, just to kind of switch them out and make things fresh. Well, if you like to order like that, it's good to have a free and hassle-free delivery policy like they have, even for larger items. So there's something for every style and every home, no matter what. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Tackle your New Year's home goals with Wayfair. So DeShaun, it was back to that. Remember last year we used to always say, my God, the Hawks injury report is like an infirmary. It felt like that tonight. And granted, Trae was a little banged up going into last night's game, and then he got that whack at the end of the game from Devin Booker. So you kind of wondered whether or not he'd be 100% tonight, but obviously he was out completely, right? And then Jalen Johnson, we're just still waiting to see just how much progression he has, because last night Quinn Snyder just said progressing, and it was that vague. Then you got DeAndre Hunter, who you really kind of need in the lineup if you're not going to have Zaccharie, Risacher, and you didn't have Zach tonight. So for me, now my question is, just like we talked about last night, the level of concern that we have for the fact that Risacher, Jalen, Trae, and DeAndre were out tonight.
Yeah, there's definitely a major level of concern. Again, we kind of talked about it in the last segment about how this isn't something that you can realistically expect for them to kind of continue with. I think that if there is one caveat or something that is good that I do like about, regardless of who is on the floor, and I think I've said this the last few different episodes that we've had, is they know what their bread and butter is. They know what their identity is. There is no drop off in style of play when no matter who it is that's sitting out. And so that is something that I like about them. You know, they do play relatively smart. And there's, while there's sometimes a little bit more minimum margin for error, depending on what that roster or active players for that particular night, they put on their thinking cap. And so, if you're going to go out there and beat them, you're going to beat them at their game. You're not going to force them to play the way that you want to play. But it is a level of concern. I think you do got to get some of these guys back at some point in time. The good thing is not only just the fact that they've been looking pretty good as of late, at least these last few games anyways, but even more so the fact that we are kind of getting closer to inching right up on the All-Star break, where guys are going to have a little bit of extra time that we typically wouldn't have been able to account for to have a chance to be able to get, healthier and finish off strong for the remainder of, what's left in the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's starting to concern me because we know we're kind of edging toward the midpoint of the season, although we know All-Star weekend is what the NBA considers the midpoint. No. But that said, when you look at DeAndre Hunter and its left foot soreness, these are some of the nagging injuries for DeAndre Hunter that concern me, because that's what tends to happen. Dre comes back, Dre plays lights out, and then whatever injury had him out last year or earlier in a season tends to creep back up later in the season. So that's what's concerning me about him. And then Zach, left abductor irritation for Risacher. And that's kind of in that hammy area. So that's something that kind of concerns me as well. And I had heard on the broadcast, we don't know whether or not it's just going to be tonight or whether this is something that might be lingering for him as well. So I think those are the two that bothered me, because the right rib contusion for Trae, that's something that we all know Trae just guts out.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, this is a very critical time that they're going to need some of those guys back as you're getting ready to. Obviously, we're going to talk about this here in a minute, but obviously you've got Boston that you're looking in the face in the next 48 hours. Following that, Martin Luther King Day, you got the New York Knicks. You know how they feel about that game that we last played them there, and then of course the Pistons. Ironically, coincidentally enough, can't even believe I'm saying this right now, but they've been looking pretty freaking good as well. One of the more impressive teams, not only in the East, but also in the NBA. So, I mean, it would be a more ideal time to kind of focus on getting healthy. But guess what? I have confidence that we're not going to see the same David Roddy that we've seen the last couple of games from a scoring standpoint. I think he has a little bit more in his bag that he can provide. In addition to Onyeka Okongwu has been looking much better consistently as well. We haven't been able to always say that over his career. We haven't seen the best tonight from Garrison Matthews, even who we know can kind of go off. So I think it's good that you can kind of share the sugar and different opportunities for different guys go around, and it makes it more difficult for the opposition to be able to do homework and prepare for just one or two guys.
Exactly. And even Bogdan Bogdanovic, they combined for 1 of 16. So if that was an off night for those two guys who are reliable, and we saw what Gary Bird did last night, then you know that there's an opportunity there for others to step up who didn't step up tonight. So I think the one other thing, and I'm going to say this in as nice a way as I possibly can, because I don't want to sound negative and I don't want to sound like I don't care and I'm not sympathetic, but it's January 15th.
Yeah.
We are closing in on that trade deadline. And sometimes when these injuries come back to back, it makes you really understand the importance of jumping in that market early to see who you might be able to get. As we mentioned, if you can get a backup point guard, that would be fantastic. If you can get someone who can go between the 3 and the 4, because when you're down Risacher, Trae, and Jalen, that's a lot. So if you can get someone, and they're pretty decent. I mean, that's why you pretty much brought up Daeqwon and Keaton today. But ultimately speaking, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that if it's going to happen now, at least let it happen while they have the opportunity to actually go after some talent and hopefully do something at the trade deadline and not be so quiet like they've been the last couple of years.
Yeah, if it doesn't hurt, it can only help. It's kind of the way that I look at it. You definitely, we know that that's kind of like a need for this particular team, and it doesn't necessarily have to take, Trae being, injured to insert. You start working a backup point guard into one of those roles and gives Trae a chance to be able to sit down so you can get the very best of Trae and not wear, not wear him out. But even more so, I think on top of that, just kind of tired of looking forward to, trade deadline and stuff like that. And it just seems like the Hawks don't never really appear to do a whole lot. I'm tired of sitting, looking at my phone and looking for the notifications on what the Hawks are doing, and nothing really ends up coming up. So it'll be good to see them actually address a very, a need that I think can ultimately help catapult them to the next level of where they want to go.
I really hope so too. And notwithstanding any type of contract negotiations or contract limitations that they have to consider with their roster, take that out of the equation for a second and just look at what the Dallas Mavericks were able to do because of the moves they made at the trade deadline. The Knicks even made a couple moves as well, but Dallas rode it all the way to the finals. So if you can make some bold moves or even a bold move, it really could do something for the Hawks. In my opinion, even if all it does is get them out of the play-in.
That's right.
That would be cool. Like that would really, really be cool. So maybe this is just one of those things that may in the long run be a positive because it'll nudge the front office to say, hey, if we've got something good that we're working towards and we've got a good core, but we need to shore up that core, then that's absolutely what I hope that Landry Fields and company are thinking about right about now. But safe travels to this Hawks team, because they got a team in Boston that normally, they don't shy away from a Boston Celtics team no matter what. But Boston's going to be big mad coming into that game because they got big blown out by the Toronto Raptors. So hopefully, this is the third and final game, by the way, Hawks Celtics. So really, we hope that the Hawks are able to win it. Celtics won that first game in a blowout. Onyeka actually tipped in a shot to help the Hawks escape with that second win. Hope they get the third win in the final game of the regular season against the Seas. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the number one place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you Saturday night.